and welcome to the Blackbird webinar on multi-camera editing in Blackbird. What we're going to do is we're going to keep the PowerPoint or the deck to a minimum and really focus on the editorial process in the editor. So first of all, this is our second of many educational webinars that we're going to be presenting, and I'm Jeff Krebs. I'm the VP of Product with Blackbird, and this, as the title says, this specific webinar will focus on multicam in Blackbird's cloud-native editing environment. Now, I'm going to use kind of these virtual air quotes because we're going to talk about what is Blackbird as a cloud-native editor. Well, certainly it runs in a browser as well. We have a plethora of features that go along with the editing. At the heart of Blackbird is a proxy video a codec, which is proxy of the high bit rate or stream content. It's actually a very clever video and audio format, codec, if you will, that enables video and audio editing in the cloud, as well as graphic adjustments in our cloud native environment. And this, of course, is for you, for your staff, or all the folks who use the Blackbird platform. And you really only have to have network access to use it. You don't need a lot of bandwidth. Blackbird becomes incredibly useful at an entry point of 2 megabits per second. Certainly some honorable mentions for workflows within Blackbird are live clipping, QC controls such as blurring, audio, bleeping, closed caption workflows, and as this webinar will be focusing on, multi-camera syncing and editing and logging for live and non-live content. And of course, direct publishing to social media or owned and operated web platforms that are OTT platforms, and of course, metadata delivery such as rich AAFs into other nonlinear systems. And yes, Blackbird is frame accurate within all of those workflows. So let's talk about multi-camera. And again, we're going to keep the still imagery at a minimum, and but we're just going to give you a little bit of an overview of what we mean by that. So multi-camera is really based on the sync relationships between two or more clips. In our examples today, we will be presenting ISO reels that are synced together with and without embedded sound. And when we say without embedded sound, what this really means is external audio recorders that need to be synchronized to picture. The agenda for today will be certainly setting up a basic multi-camera group, setting up the synchronization, if you will. Certainly interface view options. At times, we will need to resync some of these sources, which quite frequently happens with multi-camera content. We'll certainly be discussing logging spans in multi-camera. And of course, we're going to do some basic editorial of multi-camera. Then we're going to go into some advanced features, sync maps, and we have some unique features in Blackbird which allow us to do sync maps as groups, and of course more editing of multi-camera content, and then finally delivery of and how we deliver this multi-camera content. That'll make sense. So next, let's go into the editor. So let's switch over to the editor, and I'm guessing everyone can see the editor over here. So this is Blackbird. As we said, it is running in a web browser. You will take a look over here. This is proxy video of the content. This, by the way, I just happen to be running in a Chrome style browser. And in this environment, I have frame accurate control, and I can play.
And that's why people like.
And I can reverse play. And I could mark, and I can do all the things that you would expect to do in a nonlinear editor. And we did have a previous webinar with some of the basics, but now we're going to go into some advanced multi-camera controls. So in this example that you see over here, this is from a kind of an entertainment interview for the series Ted Lasso, where this was actually done during the height of COVID, where everyone was remote. So they set up this kind of panel, which we'll call the A camera. We have the B camera over here, and we have the C camera over here. Okay, just like that. So we have isolated reels, if you will, in this multi-camera environment that we're about to set up over here. So the question is, how do we set up the multi-camera sync? How in fact is that, how does that happen? You will take notice over here, if I select all three of these reels, I can click on it. Oops, hold on a second. There we go. And I can create a multi-camera group. So what we're going to do is we're going to define how the sync relationship is created between the three cameras. Now, how many cameras can we lock together? We can lock 18 cameras together. But in this environment, I'm only going to use 3 because it's just way easier to illustrate it in a webinar. So in this case, I'm just going to, normally, by the way, you would sync by time code, which would be a logical way of doing it. But in this case, I could sync by source time code or aux time code or a manual sync. In this case, I'll pick the middle one, and we've created this brand new group over here, which when we double click on it, you will see we have created this multi-camera group. So the first question, is everything in sync? In the perfect world, and I think everybody on this webinar who has dealt with multi-camera, it's supposed to be in sync. Everything is supposed to be perfect in this world. However, that may not be the case. So we're going to want to investigate to make sure that these cameras are in sync. Let's take a look over here. We're going to go into our sync multi-camera. And now the problem here is in the picture area, you can't really, there's no real slate, so you can't tell that there's a clap or if there's a clap. So we're going to want to use audio modulation. Audio is represented, white level is represented in full amplitude in a white luminance value, black represents silence, and we can see right away. This was a multi-camera locked together by time code. However, we have an issue. Right away, we have an issue. So we're going to want to put and just resync camera 3 over here. There it is. It's now resync. So now I can close the sync tool, and now we have everything in sync. I'm just going to turn this down a little just because I know the content's a little loud and I don't want to blast your speakers out.
First of all, it looks like you guys have way too much fun.
Okay, so now
making this show. And second of all, I want to know why you think we love this show so much.
You know, firstly,
okay, so we have this multi-camera group that's perfectly in sync now. I can go and start editing. I can immediately start the edit process at this point. However, let's switch back. Let's just step back a little bit over here. Perhaps I want to log this content. And, you know, why would I want to log this content? Because we have content on all cameras. There, you can see there's certainly the names of the actors over here and where the important references to the cameras are. So you can see whenever there's a question, I've switched to camera 1 or I've logged camera 1. When there's a specific actor answering the question, I can define what those cameras happen to be. You'll see over here in the logging view, you can define, do you want to define one camera? Maybe there's kind of an interaction between camera 1 and camera 2. So you could say I can define 2 cameras or all cameras. And if I'm kind of not sure, I can just say, I'll pick multicam. So it does give you the ability to do that. And the reason you would want to do that is if you wanted to maybe do a string out really quickly of all the questions for some reason, you would want to do that. You can just drag and drop them, and the cameras are automatically chosen for you on the timeline, right? So there's a really, really good reason to log it. And clearly logging certainly just makes the content searchable, right? So that's how you set up the group. In the most basic operation, that's how we set up the group with multi-camera. Now, let's talk about editing this. There's a couple of presets that you need to know for editing. First of all, and I can't show you this because I'm using a webcam. However, I have a number pad on my, like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 number pad on my keyboard. I've assigned each camera to the number pad. That's the first thing I did, because I want to be able to edit and do a live switch between the cameras. So I'm just going to load this up here on my timeline. Now you can tell I've done some pre-editing, and I'm just going to turn the audio off for now, just so we can talk, and we're going to come back to audio because I'm going to need it for reference. But you can see when I'm playing this, whenever the camera switches, it puts an edit in place and switches the camera. If you want to change that, by the way, you can just change this to other cameras as required. Clearly, you can do very typical things like trim. So if you need to make trim points, you can see the sync relationship between the previous and next shots, and you can make the changes in the camera, of the camera. That's the first thing. The second thing to really not forget, we are running this in a web browser. So we are doing multi-camera in a web browser with assignments of keyboard. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to now play the sequence, and we're going to continue the edit, if you will.
It's onset, offset, and I think that's what's making it
Number 3.
so nice, because it's just a nice bunch
Back
of
to the first.
good people, cast, and not only the cast, but also the crew.
Back to camera.
Yeah.
We all creating good vibes, and it all comes from the head to the toes of all the team Ted Lasso. So I'm very grateful to be part of this.
Back to camera.
Yes, and of course your character Danny. I mean,
so you can kind of see as I was clicking on my number pad, the camera was changing. It was switching, or it was putting an edit point in with no latency and changing the camera. So this, just by the way, is the basics. And whether you're using, and this happens to be file-based content, or it can be live streams coming in, it's the same workflow for both. So just to be clear on how that works. That's step one. And that's kind of the simplest form of multicam. And at this point, if I want to send it out to YouTube, or to any other social platform that I have on my publish buttons, I can do it, right? So multi-camera in a cloud native, a browser-based cloud native editor, as simple as this, right? And of course, it does give you the control, to jump from edit to edit. You can also, just so you know, switch back and forth if you just want to see it as a, and we'll just make that a little bit larger. There we go. I'll just drag that down. There we go. So you can just look at it in a kind of a quad split view or a non-quad split view. Simplest part of multicam. Let's move to a more complex workflow that's leans itself more to reality TV, where you have multiple cameras and days and hours and days worth of content where you have to synchronize some of that. And it also involves what we call sync map creation. So let's take a look. I'm just going to switch my view, and it's just so you know, I can kind of set up different views like this and take snapshots of my editor, and it automatically loads. So this is very different content. This is an A camera, a B camera, a C camera, a D camera, and a separate audio recorder. And we're going to want to, and just a couple things just to begin with so that you can see how this works. You can see, well, let's not look at audio because that's not what we really want to see. Let's take a look at an A camera. So we have content over here, very similar to what we had before. However, in this content, I was a little unfortunate that only one of my cameras had time code and the other cameras didn't have time code, but they had kind of a 0 offset or a 0 hour time code. So I'm going to need to force this time code into some of the other cameras. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to use something called an auxiliary time code where Blackbird automatically, and I'll just pull this up here. Sorry, my mouse is sticking a little bit. There we go. Where Blackbird automatically calculates the offset and is able to generate new time code. So that is what we call an auxiliary time code. And we have all the cameras associated with that. So how are we going to synchronize all these cameras and the external audio together, number one? And number two, it can present itself in two different ways. It could present itself as a sync map, where you have cameras on each layer, or it can present itself in a multi-camera group. Let's do the first one. Let's do the sync maps. And this is kind of an interesting exercise. So I'm going to select all these cameras over here, and I'm going to not copy them. Sorry. Come on, there. There we go. I'm going to auto sync them. And when I go into the auto sync tool, it's going to ask me some kind of a list of questions. What do you want to create? Do you want to put all the sources into a folder? Do you want to use, do you want to keep the external audio? Do you want to keep the guide audio? I'm not really interested in keeping the guide audio. And how do I want to synchronize this? Do I want to use auxiliary time code? And I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to click on the auto sync button, and it right away created this sync map, which synchronized not one of the takes, but two of the takes. If I have a day's worth of content, 30, 40 different takes, it will do this with a button click. That's the first thing that will happen. The second thing that happens is we have these independent layers. So if you see there's that layer, there's that layer, there's that layer, and that layer. By the way, this is Rick Emmett. Used to play with Triumph. It's a video that he was doing for guitar pickups, right? He has 4 different cameras, some illustrating the guitar, things like that. But the problem right now, it's all in layers. How am I going to view this in context? I need to be able to view it in context. Well, we have a feature in Blackbird which forces layers into a multi-camera group like this, right? And now I see everything in context. I can certainly play it there over here.
Yes, that he sort of really understands
now,
about.
Just FYI, we are looking at through a Zoom webinar. I am seeing full frame right over here. Zoom, because it is a screen share, may not display it like that, but I just wanted to kind of give you that little heads up.
How you wrap pickups and how many.
And I can play it backwards. And at this point, if you brought in a sync map, let's say that was created in another application, we can still display the layers as quads, or we can create that sync map inside Blackbird. The reason this is good is that you can actually log, very much like you saw in the other video. You can log within the sync map. Totally fine to do that. Or you can, just view these as quads. You can see, by the way, when we do this, I can change the cameras just like I did before. So that's the first thing. You could also, and I'm going to clear this out because this is, I'm going to show you, of course, that if I took all the clips, I could have, now this is, again, for this webinar, I only put 4 or 5 clips in here, but I could have the entire day's worth of, there we go, the entire day's worth of dailies viewed in a sync map form, just like that. And some had more cameras, some had less cameras. You could see, by the way, when you hide the layers, the quads go away. When you show the layers, you get more quads. So it's a pretty efficient workflow. It's a pretty cool workflow, actually. So that's sync maps, right? You can use it for logging. You can use sync maps to prep for multi-camera. Perfectly fine to do that as well. However, we want to actually go in and edit some of this. So let's go back to the sync example that we had over here. Let's take this day's worth of content. And instead, I'm just going to resync over here, go auto sync. Now, instead of picking a multi-track, I'm going to pick a multi-camera group, very much like you saw on the Ted Lasso content. And there it is. And if we load it up, it's pretty much, you can kind of see there's the different cameras. There's the kind of the master view of it. You can tell it wasn't a big budget, so they didn't even have a smart slate. They actually used hand claps to synchronize. That's fine. It worked for me. I had no issue with it. So there's our multi-camera. And if I want to go in, and I'll just load this guy up over here. I'll just turn off this audio 3 and 4 because it's track dependent. And you can see I did a multi-camera cut. Let me just make sure it's displaying it. There we go. I did a multi-camera cut, very much like I did on.
This is in the middle position now. You can sort of hear how you get a little bit more brightness, but you still get all that clarity. And now,
right? So it gives you that type of flexibility. If I want to, again, switch the camera, switch back to camera 4, let's say.
I turn the guitar up. So in a live stage application.
So just like that, multi-camera editing, very much like you saw on the Ted Lasso content. So the next thing that we do actually want to talk about is, how is this content delivered? Well, there's a number of ways. I could certainly conform against the high bit rate and do a final delivery. So if I wanted to, let's say, take this out, and I'll switch over here, switch back to this view over here, clear this edit out, and load up this edit over here. We're just kind of jumping back and forth between edits, but it totally works. And if I wanted to deliver to a social platform, and maybe I'll just take the first couple of minutes of this, just like this, I can just drag and drop it. This will go out to a YouTube channel. It's called Edit in Progress for the lack of calling it something creative. And now the Edge software is conforming against the high bit rate generated with the edits generated from the proxy. That's one way of delivering the content, and it will conform a high bit rate delivery. And that's perfectly fine. The other thing that you can do, and what a lot of people will do more in this type of scenario, is you may not be using Blackbird as the final delivery of the content for the high bit rate. So at this point, we can actually generate an AAF file, and here's our AAF publish. And at that point, when you generate that, it will send out the multi-camera groups and the sequence and all the source clips and all the metadata that has been logged to other applications. In our case, we've done a lot of development with Avid Media Composer deliveries, just because that's probably one of the more popular ones for reality TV. So we can deliver multi-camera groups, multi-groups, layers, transitions, and in this case, groups are probably the most important part. So everything I've shown you so far is specifically file-based. Now, one thing I did want to point out is what happens if the file is live or the stream is live, right? So I'm just going to open this up over here, and I'm going to just take one of these. There we go. I think today is Wednesday. Yes, it is. So what happens if the file is live? Now, I don't have true multicam content for live, but I can still kind of show you how this is done. Now, how do you know, by the way, that this file is live or that this video is live? Well, it's super easy to be able to see it. The chevrons to the right represent a growing file. So this is kind of I think this is broken down by the hour. I'm just going to turn the audio down so we don't have to listen to it on the webinar. There we go. So this is a kind of a forever file. You can see it growing over here. Boom, just like that. There it is. It's growing, right? As we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to just drag this over here and I'm going to drag it back. So it's basically the same. Let's just see if we did that over there. Perfect. Put it back into this guy over here. Done. Good. Okay, so we have two growing files over here, just like that. Now, what I want to do is I want to, again, create a multicam. This time I'm going to do a manual sync. And let's make sure that's working. There it is. So now we have manual sync of this multi-camera, well, it's not true multicam, but it's basically two clips growing, and you can see they're perfectly in sync. I could still go and do the sync offset, just like that. I'll close that. And you saw me do this at the beginning of the video, at the beginning of the webinar. So there we have kind of a little bit of an offset. And editorially, it works exactly the same way, except now the timeline is live, right? And because the timeline is live, I can just do
kind of an intimidating.
I'm just going to mute the audio again. There we go. Because the timeline is live, I can do a live switch between the cameras with live content. So it gives you the flexibility of pretty advanced multi-camera tools in a live or non-live environment. And that's what we wanted to present today. So at this point, we are more than happy to take questions. So super happy to take questions right now. So if there are any questions, if there are any open questions, please use the QA control, and we could certainly answer anything that comes up. We'll just try to see what's going on there with that. Okay, well, we will we'll hold it there then. We do make these webinars. We try to do them always within a half an hour. I think we've kind of met the time there. But certainly, if you have any questions about multi-camera or multi-camera editorial in Blackbird's cloud native environment, please do not hesitate to get in touch with us. You can reach us at commercial@blackbird.video. Oh, there are questions now. Sorry, we will not ignore those questions. So more on the comment than the question. I truly impressed. Okay, well, thank you. We're rather proud of it ourselves, so we're glad you like the multicam. Okay, so in the next question, by the way, is in a live situation, how's the content from various cameras getting into Blackbird Cloud? We have a number of ways. We can take a number of stream formats, such as HLS, RTMP. We can even go down to baseband SDI. So we can certainly use a number of input methods. Anything that we support, SRT, 6E through a 6E environment, any of those can be grouped together. As long as we get the content, we can synchronize it and then edit live and do a final delivery. I hope that answers that question. Any other questions while we're on it? Okay, great. Well, with that, again, invite you to contact us. We're happy to do a deeper dive, and we are doing these webinars about once a month. So you'll check your email and you will see some of the upcoming webinars and the subjects. And I hope this was of interest. And I thank you very much for joining today.